this point in time, I call this meeting to order. Is there a motion to go into work session?
Motion.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
We're in work session. Mr. Meadows, would you please come forward and present the proposed budget?
Thank you very much, Chair Tuck. I'm a little nervous. We got schools on one side and staff on the other side, so I'm going to have to.
And the fourth estate is behind you. Or third estate, the fourth estate, excuse me.
Well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to present the proposed fiscal year 2017 budget. At the strategic planning work session last month, the board agreed that the following statement reflected your vision for the county. Montgomery County is a full-service, inclusive community focused on the future, where citizens and businesses benefit from a diversified economy, receive excellent public services, and enjoy a superior quality of life while sustaining and protecting the county's natural environment and rural heritage for future generations. As I reflected on the board's vision, one phrase in that vision really stood out to me: focused on the future. When it comes to strategic planning and budgeting for our county, we must work diligently to stay focused on the future. During the review and preparation of this budget proposal, I encouraged our leadership team to focus on issues important for the county's future success, and several areas emerged to ensure that we remain focused on the future. Those areas are focus on investment in our most critical resource, our employees, focus on investment in our facilities and our programs, focus on investment in our public safety operations, including our volunteer fire and rescue operations, and finally, but not least important by any means, focus on the investment in our public schools operations. When I look back at the county's previous budgets, it's clearly evident that the board has been firmly focused on the future. In the past several years, the county has funded the construction of 2 new high schools and the renovation of a former high school for a new middle school, a new courthouse, and renovated the former courthouse for use as a joint public safety facility and consolidated 911 center. The funding provided by this board to join the New River Valley Regional Water Authority will ensure our citizens a safe and secure supply of drinking water for many years to come. When the new animal care and adoption facility replaces the current outdated and inadequate structure that we currently have, it will ensure our homeless dogs and cats are humanely treated for many years into the future. Most importantly, in the midst of staying focused on the future, the board has strengthened the county's financial position and has continued to designate funds for future capital needs for the schools and for the county. This foresight on your part will reduce the borrowing needed in future debt issues for facilities, and also recently earned the county the second positive improvement in our bond ratings in the last 5 years. You guys are really to be commended for that leadership. For the proposed fiscal year 2016-17 budget, county departments, including the constitutional offices, requested 12 new positions and $3.66 million in additional funding, an amount that does not include increased compensation or benefits adjustments for our employees. In addition, the sheriff requested that 4 of the 10 dispatcher positions currently in the sheriff's office that are planned for transfer to the New River Valley Emergency Communications Regional Authority be retained in his office and converted to additional office support positions. As you're aware from Dr. Meyer's earlier presentation, the county schools requested $3.1 in additional county funding, primarily to address compensation and benefits costs for school employees. The total projected revenue growth for the county for fiscal year 2017 is projected to be $3.1 million. The county's proposed budget for fiscal year 2016-2017 is $182.1 million, an increase of $5.9 million or 3.3% from the current year. Of this amount, $78.9 million is from federal, state, and other designated funds. The remaining $103.2 million represents county dollars not designated for a specific purpose, which includes the projected $3.1 million in growth that I mentioned earlier. Proposed funding for the county's general fund net of transfers to other funds totals $46.2 million, which is an increase of 2.6%, while funding for the school operating fund net of transfers to other funds totals $104.1 million, an increase from the current year of $4 million. Now to get to the good stuff. I recommend that the real estate tax rate for fiscal year 2016-2017 remain at 89 cents, which represents no change from the current fiscal year. 2 cents of the 89-cent tax rate will continue to go to the school capital fund to be set aside for future school capital needs. 1 cent of the real estate tax rate will be transferred to the county capital fund to replace fire and rescue equipment. This is also consistent with your past practice. In addition, I am recommending a one-time additional allocation to the county's capital fund of $374,000, which equates approximately to 1/2 cent of tax revenue from the current real estate tax rate to assist our fire and rescue departments with a backlog of equipment needs. No changes are recommended to the county's personal property tax rates for fiscal year 2016-2017. The proposed $45.5 million in county funds for the school operating budget represents an increase of $1.3 million or 3% from the current fiscal year. While the recommended budget does not fully meet the school's funding request, the county has increased local funding for the schools by over $9 million in the past 5 years. This increase is equivalent to over 12 cents on the real estate tax rate and does not reflect the additional debt service for new schools construction or the one-time funds provided to address capital or other school needs. In addition to the $1.3 million that I mentioned from the operating budget, I'm also proposing $750,000 in year-end carryover funds from the county, should they be available, to be used by the school system for the purchase of school buses, school facility repairs, and technology upgrades as requested by the schools. This would provide the school system with a total of nearly $2.1 million in additional funding to address their fiscal year 2017 budget needs. Also, I'm cautiously optimistic that additional state funds for public education will be provided by the General Assembly, which would further address funding needs for the schools, but we won't know that, of course, until the budget is finalized. In order to remain competitive with other localities in our region and to assist with staff retention and recruitment, I am proposing a 3% regrade of the county's compensation and classification plan. This 3% increase, which equates to approximately $666,000 in additional funding, would be effective on July 1, 2016. The county is blessed with many dedicated and caring employees who serve each day with dedication and a sincere desire to serve our citizens. As I noted in my budget message to you last year, a study from 2014 indicated that our pay plan at that time was, on average, about 4% lower than our peer group. The same study also revealed that our department head level positions were 11% lower than our neighboring jurisdictions. Once a new director of human resources is hired, which I've shared with everybody today, we have somebody officially now. One of his first tasks will be to evaluate the county's existing classification and compensation plan and make recommendations on how to enhance and improve our compensation benefits so that we may remain competitive in the marketplace and retain our talented employees. I'm very pleased to report that for the third year in a row, the county does not anticipate an increase in our health insurance premiums. Our employees are to be commended for their efforts in helping minimize our health care expenses through their participation in wellness initiatives and prudent use of their health and prescription drug benefits. After review and discussion by the leadership team, there was consensus to recommend the addition of 2 positions in the general fund, one an office assistant, in the General Services Department, and also an additional housekeeper to address the workload increase due to our new larger facilities such as the courthouse and the public safety building. Many of the other position requests that were submitted were very worthy of consideration, but funding simply did not exist to include them. Overall, the cost of the 5 constitutional offices total $17.8 million, which is a slight decrease, about $137,000 from the current fiscal year, which is due in part to staffing changes and the transfer of 6 dispatcher positions from the Sheriff's Office to the 911 Authority. For fiscal year 17, local funds needed to cover the operations of these 5 offices decreased to 64.9%, down from 65.3% this current fiscal year. So we're staying right at 65%. However, we must continue to bring to the attention of our legislators the ongoing increase in costs coupled with a reduction in state funding for these state-mandated offices. An additional approximately $150,000 is included to address initiatives in the Sheriff's Office, including a new jail transport van, body armor for the officers, and overtime funding. I've also included additional funding of $102,230 for the continued implementation of the Consolidated 911 Authority, which is slated to go live in July 2016. As I mentioned earlier, with regard to fire and rescue equipment, I've recommended an amount of $374,000 to address a backlog of equipment needs, and that's in addition to the 1 cent that's currently set aside each year for fire and rescue capital. The county's fire and rescue volunteers provide a critical public safety service to our citizens, and it's critical that they be provided with safe and reliable equipment to effectively and safely perform their duties. The proposed fiscal year 17 budget also includes $400,000 in capital expenditures to address needs in our parks and recreation facilities and in our libraries. These facilities all experience heavy usage by our citizens, and items such as playground equipment, carpet, and wall finishes deteriorate with time. The budget also includes $200,000 to address infrastructure upgrades for future technology in our existing county facilities, $52,000 in additional support to the Registrar's Office for the upcoming 2016 presidential election, and also $52,000 for increased costs related to our property and fire and rescue insurance. With the anticipated opening in 2017 of the new animal care and adoption facility, I've included $150,000 to begin to address the staffing and operational expenses related to that new facility. For 2017, the county received requests for increased funds from outside agencies totaling over $455,000 more than the current $1.7 million provided by the county. While some of these increases are mandated, other requests are to continue existing services or to add new services. The proposed budget does not recommend funding any new outside agencies and only provides increased funds for those outside agencies where funding is either mandated or needed to cover the county's share of the cost of services. This proposed budget also does not include any additional funding for the county's stormwater management program. County staff continues to evaluate and develop this program, and we will be discussing with you over the next fiscal year how best to provide the resources necessary to manage this important and mandated local program. In conclusion, once again this year, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Mark, Angie, Ruth, and Carol for their assistance with the preparation and presentation of this proposed annual budget. Mark, Angie, and Carol spend countless hours reviewing, adjusting, reviewing again, and debating with me the numbers to ensure that the information you receive is as accurate as possible. Ruth ensures that my budget message is clearly stated and that our presentation to you looks its very best. Thanks also go to Susan Dickerson in our finance department, who coordinates the outside agency requests, prepares many of the forms used in the budget development process, and compiles the budget document for publication. I would not be able to present a recommended budget to you each year without these individuals' support. As you review the accompanying budget information, please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. The required public hearings on the budget and the tax rate are scheduled for Thursday, April 7th at 6 p.m. If the board agrees, we are scheduled to establish the real estate tax rate and adopt the budget at a special Board of Supervisors meeting on Monday, April 18th. Also, a budget work session will be held with the board on Monday, March 21st at 6 p.m. if that's the board's desire. In closing, Montgomery County continues to be a very diverse and growing community, and I strongly believe that this proposed budget helps us to stay focused on the future. We've addressed a number of challenges and achieved many successes in the past several years. I'm very proud of our achievements, and I'm confident that fiscal year 2017 will be another year of accomplishment for our county. Thank you for your continued leadership and for your support. At this time, what I'd like to do is ask Carol to come up. Carol, Mark Magruder, and Angie are going to walk you through some of the particulars of what I just talked about in the budget message. This is a work session tonight, and as we've talked in the past, it's a lot of information to digest this evening. Traditionally, what the board's done this evening is really just sort of soak it all in. If there's any obvious questions, we can certainly try to address those tonight, but usually what we do is wait for work sessions in the coming weeks to discuss particulars. But at this point, Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, you've heard an awful lot of numbers thrown at you here pretty quickly, so we're going to repeat some of them as we go through and sort of mention some other highlights that we want to make sure that you focus on as we go through this. We obviously cannot go through the entire book, or we'd be here for days probably, but we're going to try and hit some of the high points. One of the things I want to say about the process, as Craig mentioned, this is not usually the time that we expect anybody to have formulated your questions, and particularly for some of the new people, if you have questions as you go through this information and digest it, please send them to us, send them to Craig, send them to me, either one. What we normally do is at the end of each week or 2 weeks, if we haven't gotten any questions, is prepare the responses, the questions and the responses, and send those out to everybody so everybody has the benefit of knowing what questions have been asked. Also, for our 2 new board members in time, or to our former board members or continued board members if you so desire, please feel free to come by any time, or if you'd like to set a time for us to walk you through any of the detail, we'll be more than happy to do that. So with the housekeeping details said, let's start with requests. This is a graphic that our public information office helped us with. We use this in our leadership team meetings to be able to remind everyone, and as we went over requests from each department, we added another piece to the yardstick here. The point being is that if you look at the gray area at the bottom, that's how much money was available. And if you look at the red area to the top, that's how much requests were over and above the monies that we had available to allocate. So requests exceed available resources by 124%. And here's what they break down to. For departments and county departments, and including a request for employee compensation, $4.3 million in requests. The school's request for county funds, $3.1 million, for a total of $7.4 million. The amount of undesignated revenue was $3.1 million. There's also savings in debt service, and there have been a lot of debt service numbers thrown out between the refunding the prior year, and Angie's going to go through the detail of how we come up to this amount available for reallocation a little later in the presentation. So we started out with all the requests and the available dollars having a shortfall of $4.1 million. And if you equate that to the real estate rate, it's over 5 cents. It's actually 5.5 cents. There are an awful lot of numbers on this page. And I'm not going to go over the detail of each one of them, but there are some things I want to point out. The total budget is the number at the top. It's $182.1 million. The general fund dollar you see here, $116.5 million, that represents all of the general fund, including those monies that get transferred to other funds. So all the items you see here in red are the transfers that go to other funds from the general fund revenues. That leaves general government, or county departments as we refer to them, at $46.2 million. The increase in the general government from the prior year is $1.15 million. As you go down through the other funds, you can see almost $4 million increase in the operating fund for schools, school nutrition fund, and almost $800,000 in an increase of county capital fund. The total increase of the entire budget over FY16 is 5.9 million, and that's your number of 5,855,243. The new dollars are listed below: 3.1 million in undesignated, 3.1 million from designated in schools, and that also includes nutrition. The total dollar amount again, 5.855 or 5.9 million. And out of that, 76% of these dollars are attributable or go to public schools. And with that said, our next tag team person is Mark, and he's going to go through more specifics about the dollars.
Okay, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our undesignated revenues. The undesignated portion of county revenues makes up the largest portion of the county revenue structure. And they are unrestricted revenues, which means that they can be used for just about any purpose. If you remember back in January, I presented the county's preliminary revenue projections. And at that time, we were looking at about $3 million in new revenue. For the proposed budget, that number has been revised to $3.1 million. And that extra $100,000 is actually in our new construction and real estate. So if we look at what makes up that $3.1 million, we estimated about $1 million from the change to proration. Other personal property growth was about $500,000. Growth from the new construction and real estate is $1.3 million. And then all of our other local taxes was around $300,000. So the increase in designated revenue is $3.1 million in total. There's no tax rate increase included in the proposed budget. Talk about the increased dollars. The undesignated revenue that went to school operating is $1.2 million. Schools had $2.7 million in designated dollars from the state, and then we had debt service savings of about $116,000. So the total school operating budget increased by approximately $4 million. Undesignated revenues to the county operating is $1.1 million. Our designated resources actually dropped by about $23,000. Debt service savings of $73,000. Total of $1.2 million approximately was increased to the county's operating budget. In addition to that, each year we calculate the value of a penny on the tax rate, and that penny went up from $730,000 to $748,000. When that happened, we adjust the penny value that goes to those other funds, such as the 2 cents that go to school capital, the 1 cent that goes to fire and rescue. So we had to add $36,000 to the 2 pennies that go to school capital. We then also added an additional $18,000 to the 1 cent that goes to fire and rescue, plus the half a penny that was set aside, that was $374. So your $374 plus your $18,000 gets you $392,000 for fire and rescue. And then the additional $400,000 in capital improvements was set aside for county capital. We'll actually talk a little bit more in detail about that later in the presentation. This next slide shows the resources that make up the county's budget. And one thing I wanted to point out is if you look at this breakdown, you'll see that the designated dollars make up 43% of the total county budget. And if you remember back in January when I talked about the state and the reduction of designated dollars that have occurred, I went back 10 years ago and pulled the 2007 budget, and at that time 53.9% of the county's budget was in designated dollars, and so now we're down to 43. So that was a 10% drop just within a 10-year time period. But if we look at this, again, designated dollars make up the lion's share, followed by real estate, and then you can see the breakdown in other categories there that make up the total budget. Our undesignated revenue, again, that's the revenue that you have the most control over. $103.2 million. Real estate makes up the lion's share of that, followed by personal property. And then you can see the breakdown in other categories that make up the balance of the budget. This next slide shows how the budget is allocated. Again, it's $182.1 million. All school funds minus the portion of debt service that is attributable to the schools makes up 61% of the total resources, or the total expenditures in the budget. If you add back in the debt service for the schools at an additional 10%, 71% of the total budget goes to schools. The remaining 29%, 25% goes into the general fund, 3% for county debt service, and then 1% for county capital, and then less than 1% for the law library. This next slide shows what we call the general government portion of the general fund. It's the general fund minus the transfers to the other funds. It makes up $46.2 million. Public safety is the primary, makes up the lion's share of that at 34%, followed by general government administration at 13%. And then you can see a breakdown there of each individual agency and how that money is distributed. The next slide shows county funding for schools from 2008 to 2017. And as we said earlier, we have $45.5 million rounded to $46 million that is the transfer from the general fund to the school operating fund. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Carol, and she's going to go through some more detail about individual requests and what was actually funded in the budget.
We want to make sure you leave with plenty of numbers tonight. We don't want anybody not to have enough numbers tonight. There are some things within the budget that are required based on agreements or based on contracts or things that go on, and we just wanted to highlight those for you. Craig has mentioned before the 911 authority, and we'll talk a little more in a couple of slides about which positions are staying in the sheriff's office, and then the transfer of the positions to the 911 authority. The net of all the changes is the increase of 102 that we're going to need to provide. The property and fire insurance, this is premium increases that we anticipate every year. As Craig said before, we are very fortunate not to have an increase in health insurance. That stayed fairly stable. So these are properties and fire and rescue insurances. The 177 revenue sharing agreement, that is an agreement that the board entered into a couple of decades ago now that requires that any revenue collected in excess of $5,000 in the 177 corridor will be shared with the city of Bradford at 27.5%. So as revenue has increased in the corridor, so has the amount that we need to share with the city of Bradford. And this $20,000 is to bring up the existing revenue refunds budget to meet that obligation to the city of Bradford. There is a presidential election coming up, and there will be costs associated with that in the registrar's office. So an increase of $42.5 is included in that. The health department local match, and the health department is one of the few cooperative agencies that we have that the state actually pays their percentage of costs. So when you invest 38 cents out of the dollar in the health department, you get 62 cents from the state, which then the full dollar will be available to residents in Montgomery County. General contingency increase, the board adopted a policy that says there needs to be 1% of the general fund functions established for general contingencies, and in order to comply with that policy, $38,000 will need to be added to the general contingency base from FY16. So all in all, about $290,000 worth of, I don't know, mandated, required, have to do kinds of things. Public safety is the next area we want to make sure that we bring to your attention in terms of what costs are included. There's an additional $50,000 in overtime in the sheriff's budget to pay compensatory time, holiday time, or overtime. As you know, as we've discussed in the past, they accrue a lot of overtime or compensatory time, and there's a need to buy down those types of hours. This amount, the $50,000, when added to the base amount, will provide $125,000 annually for those payments. There is also added $34,000 to pay overtime to deputies who supervise inmates on county projects. And one of the major ones they've been quite helpful on is cleaning the animal shelter. We've been woefully unable to find people to do that job, and it's been very helpful to have the inmates be over there, but they have a limited overtime budget in the jail, and this is the amount that needs to be added to continue that type of work. Also included in special contingencies is another $50,000 for potential overtime in the sheriff's office should the board decide to move forward with the mowing initiative. That was brought up when we went through the budget for FY16. It's included in special contingencies in the current year. It's included next year because no action has been taken, so it's up to the board to decide if you want to move forward with that project or not. For the purposes of our new people here, special contingencies is where items are held sort of in waiting, and they're waiting for details or decisions to be made, and in order for those to be made available for expenditure, it takes a resolution by this board to move them from special contingencies into the sheriff's budget or wherever they may go for expenditure. And so we hold things in special contingencies when we're not quite sure of the amounts, or we haven't had a decision made, or those types of things. And we'll go over some more things that are in special contingencies in a moment. The last thing on this page is for body armor, and you see the amount there. There's a need to replace some body armor in the sheriff's office, and that's the amount included for that item. Okay, we've talked about 911 authority and the transfer from the sheriff's office. There were originally or currently 10 dispatcher positions in the sheriff's office. 6 of those are going to transfer to the 911 authority, and the dollars associated with those 6 FTE is the $266,440 you see in red. 4 dispatcher positions are going to be retained by the sheriff in order to handle support functions that will not be provided by the 911 authority. The dollars associated with that, you see there, are the dollars that are already in the sheriff's budget and being retained in the sheriff's budget to support those positions. 3 of those FTE are 100% funded by the county. 1 of those is partially funded by the compensation board and the county. The $374,000 for fire and rescue equipment, Craig and Mark have both already mentioned that. Okay, special contingencies. Craig mentioned the inclusion of a 3% scale regrade. That moves the entire scale, bottom, top, and middle, up 3%. The cost of that, and we'll talk about the part-time people not on the classified plan, but the cost of that for the classified plan is $630,000. And of this amount, there was base savings within the departments in the base that have been applied to it. That's $520,000. There's also the county's share of the debt service savings of $73,000. Those two together cover 94% of the cost for the 3% regrade. The 3% wage adjustment, there are part-time employees who are not on the classified plan, and to ensure that the departments have the opportunity to increase their pay by a like amount, it's $36,000 that has been included as well. Craig mentioned the funds for the Animal Care and Adoption Center. Again, once the plans are put together and a budget formalized, our committee meets this Thursday. We'll begin looking at those. A resolution would come back to this board to then approve the transfer of monies from special contingencies to the appropriate expenditures. And lastly, there's $200,000 included for infrastructure upgrades for future technology. There's a study currently being done on this particular facility in the county because what we're finding is the cabling's old, and the routers are old, and the switches are old, and it can't carry the technology of today. So once that evaluation is done, that'll be one facility we'll be looking to funds to be able to upgrade that, ensure the appropriate electrical systems and HVAC in order to support future technologies. County capital, and Craig talked about that too. Just to review a little bit, $248,000 for Parks and Rec maintenance projects, and what was extremely surprising to me was I had no idea how expensive playground equipment is, but $200,000 of that is for playground equipment to replace that with items that meet the current standards for playground equipment. There's also some flooding on the Huckleberry Trail and the disc golf course. It's actually to remove some old bathroom structures which have been out near the disc golf course for the last 15 years, and they just need to be taken down. Library maintenance projects, $152,000 toward maintenance projects in 3 libraries. Including carpeting, lights, parking lot, mulching of the playground equipment there at Meadowbrook, and several items that need to be done to keep these facilities maintained. And I promised an explanation of debt service, and not to fail you, there are more numbers, and Angie's going to go over those.
As Carol said earlier, the debt service numbers are a little bit confusing, and different numbers have been thrown out over the past few months about the amount of debt service savings, so we wanted to make sure that we explain that to you this evening. The debt service savings that are recognized in the budget from ongoing dollars is $190,000, as we said earlier. And you may recall when we did the refunding of the 2008 bonds in February that we talked about we would recognize savings this year of $440,000. So the difference between those two amounts is $250,000. So you may wonder why the difference. Well, there are other factors involved in this besides just the savings amount. There's the expense side of the debt service and also the funding sources. So the combination of those factors are what make up the ongoing savings. We knew that we would have a debt service decrease in expense this year of about $120,000 even before the refunding occurred. And then we did get additional decrease from the refunding of about $440,000. That gives you the subtotal in the middle of the page of just over $500,000. So that's the amount that debt service decreased or will decrease from 16 to 17. The reason that or what makes up the funding for the debt service that changed, 2 of the items are from one-time monies. You may recall that when we issued the 2008 bonds, we had a large debt service reserve, and that was required by the bond indenture, and it was related to the market at the time. It was about $7 million that was to be set aside to pay debt service as we went along. And then at the end of the bond issuance, when all that debt was paid off, that would go away. Well, those are the bonds that we refunded. So when we did that, it freed up that debt service reserve and allowed us to issue fewer bonds, a lower amount with the refunding, which saved us a lot of money. Because that debt service reserve went away, those dollars that we were using year by year went away as well. So that's what the 149,026 represents. The next item is the tax rate set aside. This is different than the pennies on the tax rate that are going to schools now for school construction. Back in fiscal year 2007, which some of you will remember this, we had a plan in place to issue the bonds that would cover some schools and the courthouse project. And we were able to plan that out ahead of time, and we knew the debt service was going to go up, and so we would need to raise the tax rate for that. So in 2007, the board chose to set aside 2 cents of the tax rate, and that there were cents set aside in 2007, 8, and 9. Those monies were held and used to what we call shave the peak of the debt service. The debt service was going to go up sharply. We had these funds set aside, so we didn't have to raise the tax rate as much. We did it more gradually because the board chose to plan that out ahead of time. We don't need to use those dollars this year because there's not an increase in the debt service. There will be an increase in a future year, fiscal year 2020, because of the timing of how some bond payments are coming due. So there are some of those funds set aside for that year, but we don't need to use them in the upcoming year. Those 2 one-time items total $370,000. So if you net out the $561,000 decrease of the expenses with those one-time monies that went away, the net of that is $190,000, which is what's been freed up. And we allocated that to the county and schools, as was discussed earlier, based on the actual refunding and how much of those bonds were for schools versus county. And with that, I will turn it back over to Carol.
This particular graphic, I think, came from a discussion that you all had during your retreat about wanting to see how the dollar was broken out. So thankfully to our Public Information Office, they were able to come up with a graphic. Now, let me tell you what this means or what dollars we're talking about. The first sheet you saw at the beginning that had the 182.1 million, that's total dollars in the budget, and that's what this represents, is total dollars in the budget. 71 cents, or if you recall, as Mark talked about in one of the pie charts, 71% supports schools in some way, but that includes everything. It's school debt service, school nutrition, school capital, and school operations. The other 29 cents, and we tried to break that out into coins of some sort to look at. The county functions there in the quarter are those that appear on page 10 in the pie chart. All of those listed is your 25% of the total. County debt service, again, about 3 cents. County capital, a penny, and all these numbers are rounded. So where are we in the process? We have not identified a specific work session for next Monday night, but if we need to have one, we can certainly have one during the meeting then. Your next target date is March 21st, and at that meeting, you're scheduled to establish the advertised budget and the advertised tax rate. On April the 4th, there is not a scheduled work session before your PSA meeting, but if necessary, we can certainly schedule one then. The public hearing is April the 7th and scheduled to adopt the budget and the tax rate on April 18th. So that's where we are. That's all we have to present to you tonight. Again, we don't expect everybody to have detailed list of questions, and oftentimes you ask us hard questions, and we have to go back and look up stuff to know the answers. So feel free to send them to me, Craig, either one, and we'll certainly begin putting those responses together.
First thing I'd like to ask my fellow board members is everyone in favor of having a work session on the March 14th? All right, and Annette,
That's fine.
okay. I think that's important. It gives us a weekend to try to take, at least for those of us who are working, to be able to work on the budget over the weekend and come up with some questions for staff and some concerns. So let's plan on doing that. Is there any questions? I'm going to start with Daryl. I understand we've just been given this document. I didn't know, I'll just start with you. Do you have any questions at this time? I know you're going to have some questions in the future, but...
I don't think so.
Hey, Mr. Mott.
Anticipate future questions, but right now this is a lot to digest all
It
at once.
is a lot of numbers.
Ms. Diggs?
I just have one question, but I don't know where it is in all this. It had to do with the 3% increase for the employees, and it was coming from, was it coming from one-time money?
No, what we do each year is we go back into the base, and it's called like challenging the base. Where is there savings within the base budget? And it comes from savings in the FY16 base budget in various departments.
Okay, oh, it's on page 15. Okay, so I was trying to figure out, I guess what I was trying to figure out is, since we were trying to do something for the employees, that it says 94% of this cost is absorbed within the budget due to departmental savings and the county share of debt service savings. So I guess what I was wondering is, like, if you put that in the budget, then it's an expense for the next year too. So where does that money come the next year? Do we have to find another
It's not a
place?
one-time savings, it's a savings of ongoing dollars.
Okay, so this is money that is every year?
Is every year.
Oh,
Did you have any others, Mary?
nah, I just was trying to understand that.
Just,
Mr. Creed? Ms. Perkins?
I apologize for my lateness, but I did not catch what was the total amount of the budget.
$182 million and out in some odd sense.
106.
106.
61.
Thank you. You got there quicker
Okay,
than I
got
did.
it. Thank you. That's all I needed. I just wanted to know the amount.
Mr. King?
Just a couple of questions. In the registrar's office, excuse me, is that including the increase for the poll workers?
I'm told yes.
How much of an increase? Do you remember?
That whole 42,500 is seasonal wages.
And what,
I think he's talking about a pay increase.
pay increase?
No.
I don't think it reflected any increase. It's additional wages to cover for the elections, but it did not include an increase in pay for the daily rate. It did
So
not
it's
include
just-
that. So that's something you'll probably want to talk about in the budget too.
Yeah. So it's an increase for just the poll workers for the election day?
It's an increase due to the anticipated increase in labor costs because of the presidential election, but it did not change the rate of pay for the poll workers.
I'd like to see that put in here somewhere. Thank you.
At this point in time, I don't have any questions, but did any of the questions up here spark any further questions among board members before we? Is there a motion to go out of work session at this point in time?
Motion.
Second. All those in favor, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Mott?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And I want to make sure I get the closed. Is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss the following? The acquisition of real property for public purposes or the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining power or bargaining position or negotiating strategy of a public body. 1, the former Blacksburg Middle School property. 2, the former Blacksburg High School property.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.